If you could get away with anything, no one watching, no punishment, no guilt, would you still choose to do the right thing? In other words, is justice something we truly value, or do we only act justly because we're afraid of the consequences if we don't? These are the primary questions that Plato tackles in the Republic. It's one of the most influential books in all of philosophy, and in this episode, we're breaking it down. What Plato says justice really is, why it matters, and how understanding it can improve our lives today. Let's get into it. The Republic is written as a dialogue between Socrates and a group of his friends. Early in the conversation, one of the younger men makes a bold claim. Justice isn't worth it. It's just a compromise. As he puts it, no man would keep his hands off what was not his own when he could safely take what he liked out of the market, or go into houses and lie with anyone at his pleasure, or kill or release from prison whom he would, and in all respects be like a god among men. To illustrate his point, he tells the story of the ring of Gyges, a story about a man who finds a ring which, when he puts it on, gives him the power to be invisible and free from the consequences of his actions. The man immediately contrives to be chosen one of the messengers who is sent to the court, where as soon as he arrives, he seduces the queen, and with her help conspires against the king and slays him and takes the kingdom. The point of telling the story is to show that injustice, when allowed to be performed without penalty, is better than justice. He says, "A man is just, not willingly or because he thinks that justice is any good to him individually, but of necessity, for wherever anyone thinks that he can safely be unjust, there he is unjust. For all men believe in their hearts that injustice is far more profitable to the individual than justice." Now again, this is not Plato's view of injustice. This is the younger man's view of injustice, which Plato spends the rest of the book responding to. But I want to pause here and ask the same question that I did at the beginning of the episode. If no one's watching, there's no punishment, no guilt, would we still choose to do what's right? Maybe pause the video to take a second and think about it. Because how we answer doesn't just reveal our beliefs about justice, it also reveals something about who we really are. But moving on, Plato, through the voice of Socrates, begins to examine which is better for its own sake, justice versus injustice. And he starts by asking a question. What is justice really? Instead of looking at the individual first, he zooms out to look at justice in the state, where he says justice is easier to spot. His reasoning is thus: where there is the larger the quantity of justice, it is likely to be larger and more easily discernible. I propose, therefore, that we inquire into the nature of justice and injustice, first as they appear in the state, and secondly in the individual, proceeding from the greater to the lesser and comparing them. So Socrates and his companions turn their discussion to designing a city, believing that if they can identify justice at the level of the state, they can better identify justice at the level of the individual soul. They begin with the basics: farmers, builders, weavers, and a doctor. But they soon realize that's not enough. So they add carpenters, blacksmiths, shepherds, and merchants to trade with other cities. Still, this city only meets simple needs. If people want luxury, more goods, more land, more comforts, they'll need to take from their neighbors. And Plato says this is how war begins. So the city now needs warriors, which Plato calls guardians. But now who will rule? Socrates says the best and the wisest of the guardians will be chosen to be rulers. At this point, the city has three distinct classes: the producers, the guardians, and the rulers. And as for justice, Socrates says it is this: justice will be admitted to be the having and doing what is a man's own and belongs to him. When the producer, the warrior, and the ruler each do their own business, that is justice, and will make the city just. But what does this have to do with the individual soul, which is, after all, what we set out to examine? Well, Socrates says that just as the state has three distinct classes, which are the producers, the guardians, and the rulers, the soul has three corresponding parts. That is, our appetite, spirit, and reason. Reason is like the rulers. It is wise and has the care of the whole soul. Appetite is like the producers. It hungers and thirsts, the alley of sundry pleasures. Spirit is like the warriors. When a man's desires violently prevail over his reason, his spirit is on the side of his reason. Each part plays a role. And just like in the city, justice in the individual soul is each part doing its job, with reason in control. To exemplify the three parts of the soul in action, picture this. You're trying to study for a test. Reason tells you to focus, but appetite tugs you toward the quick hit of Instagram reels. You give in, and an hour vanishes. Now you're frustrated, even angry with yourself. That anger, that's your spirit backing up reason after the fact, condemning your choice. But rewind. Let's say you resist the urge to do something other than study, and you keep studying. Now your spirit shows up differently, as pride, grit, a fire that says keep going. In this case, spirit isn't just reacting, It's actively fighting alongside reason, helping you stay on course. Understanding these three parts of the soul isn't just philosophy, it's practical. Because when we want to accomplish something, the problem typically isn't knowing what to do, but simply having the discipline to do it. And Plato's framework helps us to spot the inner conflict and use our spirit to fuel our reason, not our appetite. And Plato says that the individual in whom the several qualities of his nature do their own work will be just. In other words, when reason rules, spirit supports, and appetite obeys. This is Plato's central image of the good life, a soul in harmony with itself. And so to return to the question of whether justice is better than injustice, for Plato, the answer is simple. The just soul is healthy, while the unjust soul is diseased and weak. He writes, "Virtue is the health and beauty and well-being of the soul, and vice the disease and weakness and deformity of the same." And if a failing body can make life hardly worth living, Plato says the same must be true, and more, of the soul, which is what gives the body life. He writes, "When the bodily constitution is gone, life is no longer endurable. And shall we be told that when the very essence of the vital principle is undermined and corrupted, life is still worth having, if only he be allowed to do whatever he likes?" To wrap up, Plato's message is clear. A soul in harmony with itself is worth more than any wealth or power gained through injustice, because injustice doesn't just hurt others, it corrupts our own internal being. And if that's not enough, Plato adds a further argument in favor of justice. He says that justice not only leads to peace in this life, but it also shapes our fate in the next. He writes that even when the just man is in poverty or sickness, or any other seeming misfortune, all things will in the end work together for good to him in life and death. For the gods have a care of anyone whose desire is to become just and to be like God. So in the end, Plato's argument is clear. Justice makes the soul whole, and that wholeness is worth more than anything the world can offer. So now the question is ours. Is justice worth it for its own sake? Is inner peace more valuable than power, pleasure, wealth, or anything of the like? Plato's answer is yes. But if you disagree, let me know why in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you like this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to continue learning philosophy with me. The goal of this channel is to bring philosophy to the modern world, to help us think more clearly about the world around us, and in the process of doing so, live better lives. I'm so excited to share this and future episodes with you guys, and I hope to see you in the next one.